Have you heard of autism spectrum disorder? I heard glass shattering. It just made it real when he said that. I kind of heard all I needed to hear when he said, have you ever heard of autism spectrum? And for me, it was just the other shoe had dropped. I just told her, I said, he's not going to be like other little boys.
Planning for a loved one with special needs takes clarity and the right strategy. Remarkable Futures brings practical conversations and expert insight to help families protect benefits, build stability, and move forward with confidence.
Hi, I'm Steve Norton, the host of the Remarkable Futures podcast. And today I have a very special guest with me, my beautiful bride, Cheryl Norton. It's going to be a little personal on this podcast today. We're going to share our backstory a bit, talk about the issues that we've faced with our son Harry, who has autism and intellectual disabilities. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we've tried to provide a good foundation for his sisters as well. They're going to play an important part of his life after we're gone, so that we'll talk about that too. So without further ado, my beautiful bride, Cheryl Norton.
Thank you, Jared.
So I thought, why don't we start at the beginning? So tell me about the night we met, from your perspective.
My perspective, well, a friend of mine was hosting a Halloween party at her brother's apartment, and in the town I grew up in, Milford, and wasn't really sure I even wanted to go, but I did. And my friend's boyfriend had a roommate named Steve, and he was going to be there and at a Halloween party. And it was a black and orange party. You had to wear either black or orange. And it's a good thing you weren't wearing orange, because that would have been a hard no. I don't like orange.
Yes. From my perspective, same sort of thing. I actually tried to weasel my way out of attending this Halloween party because I had received another invitation to go to a Halloween party in West Hartford that I had been hearing about for years. It was hosted by two young ladies who just dressed up as Elviras, and I was kind of wanting to see that, but
I was competing with Elviras.
but Rob held me to it. Rob, my roommate, and said, "You've got to come. There's a girl I want you to meet," and he was right. And I remember being at the party and sitting with you on a couch and talking, and then all of a sudden it just dawned on us, because we look around and there's nobody else there, because everybody else had left to go to
Seven Seas,
a bar down the street, and we were just so entwined in our conversation that it just I kind of ignored everybody else, and I kind of ignored everybody else since in terms of other females. So. But it was a special night. So fast forward, we get our first place. We decide to have kids, and
3 children in 3 years.
yeah. So child number 1, wonderful, cute Tessa, redhead, fireball. Child number 2, ever energetic, sunshine girl, Abby, who happens to live in California now. So she's in her native climate. And then the boy, number 3. So wonderful experiences having them all. I can't think of anything more just beautiful and lovely that happened in my life, other, outside of meeting you, of course, our children. But things progressed, and at a certain point, we realized that Harry had issues, and Your background in education, I think, was very helpful with that. For our podcast viewers, Cheryl has a master's in elementary ed, was a teacher for a number of years, and also finished her career as the managing editor at Weekly Reader of the pre-K edition. So anyway, enough about the background. So what were the tells that you remember that something wasn't quite going the way it should with Harry?
Oh, he didn't babble. He didn't look at me. He loved to be cuddled, but he wasn't responding to my voice and looking at me when I spoke to him. And I mean, he was, this is when he was a baby, of course. And this isn't my first rodeo. I have a brother with autism. He's 56 years old. We are 2 years apart. I'm 2 years older than him, and I have very clear memories of what it was like growing up with him. And then, of course, with my background in education, I also know some of the early education signs of children who are on the spectrum. And having had 2 other children and knowing what the milestones were that they should be achieving at certain months, I knew something was off. And when I'd put him to bed at night, I would say my little prayers to him, and one of them was, please don't have autism. Just please, honey, please don't have autism. And everybody around me who also picked up on the fact that he wasn't babbling and he wasn't interacting the way you would expect a baby who was 6, 8, 10 months old to be interacting. They would say, oh, Cheryl, he's just a boy, and boys develop later and slower than girls do. You've had 2 girls. You can't expect the same from a boy. And I remembered thinking, I didn't say this to people, of course, but I wanted to say, stop placating me. I'm his mother. Of course I know. You think you're soothing me, you're just placating me. That's what I would think to myself. I would never say that to somebody out loud. And it was kind of hard with Harry because my sister and I were pregnant at the same time. So our niece is exactly 7 weeks younger than Harry. And she was hitting all her milestones, if not on time, early. Cute little thing. She's such a tiny little thing, walking at about 10 months old. So, I mean, here she was ahead of the curve. And I adore my niece. She's a wonderful young lady now, and she was an adorable child. But I was so jealous. And it was very hard to be with our extended family and have these 2 very young toddlers, one on time or ahead of the game in terms of developing. And Harry wasn't. Harry was very much behind. And it was very obvious to my mother. I think she knew early on. And even with you, I mean, I wanted to tell you, you know, but at the same time, I didn't want to hurt you. But, you know, given that I am the one who grew up with autism in my household, in my family, and you hadn't, I was kind of afraid of telling you what I thought was going on with Harry, and horrifying you, shocking you, hurting you. So I kind of kept it to myself.
Oh, I didn't know you did that until now. So I guess thank you for trying to protect me, but don't keep things from me.
There was also no good way to go about telling you either.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not a neurologist. It was just what I was thinking.
Well, speaking of neurologists, you know, I think part of what I thought with Harry in the beginning is I was hyperactive as a kid. I was a train wreck up until like third or fourth grade. You know, I would throw rocks at other kids. I was in fights all the time. So I was concerned that maybe that was his issues, that he had the heredity, that he had my hyperactivity, but you know, it became clear there was something else going on. So we did eventually go to a neurologist. We also had his hearing tested. I think the hearing was first, because we thought maybe he's just not hearing us, and his hearing was fine. And then we saw a neurologist that was on the money with his diagnosis, but had horrible bedside manner in terms of the delivery. And I think back as well on your journey in terms of your vision, and having, and you have Stargardt syndrome, which is, you know, you're legally blind but have peripheral vision, so you see, but you don't, you know, by the definition, you're legally blind, can't drive, those types of things. But you also went through a process of going to several different ophthalmologists and eye doctors that told you that you were faking it, or, you know,
It was insubordinate.
Yeah, insubordinate.
And I was thinking about Friday night's date instead of paying attention to the letters on the chart and reading them, and I was wasting the doctor's time, and that he was going to have something to say to my mother, who was also his patient. And yeah.
So it was, you were, you know, just by not concentrating enough, apparently you weren't seeing. So, but I
was only 20 years old, and for a 20-year-old to have perfectly fine vision, and then all of a sudden to not be able to see, you know, the two letters under the big E on the chart, that's a little alarming.
So in your journey, you eventually go to the Boston Eye Institute, and they tell you what you have. And you know, I guess it is what it is, and you dealt with it. And you know, to me, you're a rock star, because I don't even think about it every day, because it just, you know, there are minor things that come up where you don't see something, but you know, we'll go to a restaurant and the lighting will be too dark for you to see a menu with a magnifier. But getting back to Junior, in that appointment with that neurologist is probably one of the hardest memories I personally have, because it was a confirmation he was correct, and Harry was he even 3? I don't think he had even turned 3 yet.
Right.
Yeah. So I know my view of that day, but what was your view? A confirmation of your fears?
Wow. That one's kind of seared into my memory. our friend across the street was watching the girls, so it was just us and Harry who went to the doctor. And I just remember being in that room with the doctor and you and Harry. And Harry was exploring the room, for lack of a better word. He wasn't really playing, but, he was over where the toys were. And the doctor said, "Have you heard of autism spectrum disorder?" And in that moment, and this is all because of anxiety, I can fully acknowledge that, but in that moment, I heard glass shattering, like right around my ears. That screechy sound of glass shattering. And then the sound of the doctor's voice became kind of muffled, almost like he was talking to me underwater, kind of muffled, distorted sound. So I could still hear his voice, and I could hear you just kind of going, in response, and I wasn't saying anything. It just made it real when he said that. Because despite my suspicions, until you heard it from an expert, I could always say, yeah, but I'm not a neurologist, I could be wrong. There was still that hope that my inclinations were off. I don't really remember what else the doctor said. I kind of heard all I needed to hear when he said, "Have you ever heard of autism spectrum?" And I remember scooping up our baby and leaving the doctor's office, and the receptionist, who I'm sure had been through this scenario many times before, she just looked at my face and said, "I'm so sorry." And I didn't say anything to her. I think I nodded, but I didn't say anything. So we went out to the car, and we were driving home. And you were talking about, well, we're going to get a second opinion, and we're going to go to specialists, and I'm going to call this person and that person who I know, and they can refer us, and we're going to look into this therapy. And you were very proactive, like, okay, we're not going to take this lying down. We're gonna explore this further. And for me, it was just the other shoe had dropped. And I think that was the only moment that I felt sorry for myself. Because, I've lived this life before. As a sister and as a daughter of parents who were struggling, because it was the 1970s and it was a very different time. People, really nobody had heard of autism. I mean, unless you worked in the field, no one had heard of it. And it was just a very, very different time. And I remember it was summertime, and the windows were a little open, but I was kind of like huddled up against the passenger side door, and I don't even know if I said it out loud too much, but I just was mumbling or whispering, I should say, "I can't do this again. I just can't do this again." And I'm not really one to feel sorry for myself because I don't think of it as a good coping skill. You know, you kind of push through, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you have two choices. You can curl up in a ball in the corner of the room and feel sorry for yourself, or you could get your shit together and take care of your family. And we got back home, and, you know, the girls were little, and, you know, hi, Mommy, hi, Daddy, you know, they were all excited, and I just, like, snapped back into it, like, you know, okay, we're home, you know, the girls need baths, and, you know, gotta get ready for tomorrow, and I'm not saying that I haven't had hard days since, but I resolutely believe that, you know, wallowing is just worthless.
Well, it's that day for me. First of all, this is one of one of your strengths is you have such better specific memories of everything. I forget the details. You remember all the details, which is just like you're my instant recall button if I need help with something that we experienced together. And you know, my takeaway from that day was more emotional in the sense of that was where my memories fall in, but I also I frankly went into denial mode. I didn't want to believe the doctor. I thought he was full of it. I just was not convinced, but at the same time, I took it in as if this is the situation, if this is the diagnosis, I want to be all over it. I want to, as you said, like get him every possible therapy known to mankind and those that aren't known to mankind at that point. And or I should say humankind to be more politically correct and accurate. But it was frustrating because there's not a cure. And you know, I've come over time to realize that Harry is special and he doesn't need to be cured. In fact, some of his autism traits are what makes him a unique and genuine person. So I think you know, part of the journey is a mourning process, which nobody died, but there was a death of normalcy. There was the thought of, you know, this kid is not likely going to drive. Not because he's not physically capable, but he probably would just be overstimulated. And the thought of him behind the wheel would scare the living daylights out of me. At this point, he's not going to have those normal things that you would expect as he grew up. But at the same time, there's so many wonderful things that we've experienced with him. I guess I'll touch on that in a little bit. We can talk about that. But I also want to kind of talk about the battles we've had to fight,
Well,
and which ones to fight and which ones not to fight. And
well, one thing I wanted to say about the whole mourning thing.
yeah,
The next day, you know, the girls were, you know, Tessa was in kindergarten and Abby was in preschool, so they were both off at their programs, and I put the baby down for a nap, and I was sitting outside on the front porch, and our friend Nancy came over from across the street, and she sat with me, and I just told her, I said, he's not going to be like other little boys. And she said to me, no, he's not, but he will be Harry, and that will be enough. And that has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because as the expression goes, if you know one child with autism or one person with autism, you know one person with autism. You don't know everybody. You don't know everything there is to know about someone on the spectrum. I mean, the spectrum, as indicates, it's a wide range of abilities, and no two people with autism are the same.
And I think that in that there lies some emotional minefields in that we, as human beings, I think naturally we compare. And, there are kids with Asperger's that we have, I know several instances of children with Asperger's that are now successful adults, and that's on the spectrum. And then there are kids with autism that are completely nonverbal.
Like my brother.
And and not social at all. And it's everything in between. So you're constantly going back and forth, I think, sometimes emotionally. And I've really tried to concentrate not to be this way, but you think, oh, look at Johnny in comparison to Harry. Johnny has autism and Johnny's going to college. And then you have Susie or Fred that, is in an institution because the care that they need is so intense. And I still grapple with that. I don't know if you grapple with that, but
I think as parents, we tend to do that with all of our children.
yeah.
But it's not productive. We all know that. I think parents with children who do not have special needs, I think it's instinctive. Like, oh, Johnny, if you will, is taking AP chemistry next year. My daughter, well, we're muddling through college prep chem. So I think sometimes, as parents, our mind goes there, but logically speaking, we all know that's not a good use of our time.
Yeah. So speaking of good uses of our time, there are moments where I will see that we're out together and someone will say to you, why don't you just get a pair of glasses when they see you struggling to read something? And sometimes, depending on your mood on the day, you may fire back at them and kind of cut that down pretty quickly. And there are other days that you just roll with it. And if I would love your perspective again on sort of where you feel with Harry, which battles were worth fighting, which ones were not worth fighting. And when I mean battles, it's with like the rest of the world, because of course we want to defend Harry against everything. So
yeah, like any battle, it depends on the circumstances at the given moment. One story when we were coming back from Disney, and it was it was right after the whole underwear bomber.
no, the shoe bomber.
Was it the shoe
shoe bomber? Because we had to take our shoes off.
I know, but all of the
Yeah, the underwear bomber was before that, I believe, but same
but
context.
security was just at its peak. And so anyway, we're having to go through the scanner, and they seem to pick on men more than anybody else. So they had taken you off to the side and we're going to pat you down. And I'm trying to mind 3 children. And Harry saw something that interested him. God only knows what it was, but he bolted. So I told the girls, stay with Daddy. And I tore off after him. And I yelled at this complete stranger, "Stop my baby!" And he did. This, 6.5 foot tall man held on to our little boy and was looking around like, oh God, am I going to get in trouble for this? And I thanked him profusely, and I scooped him up, and I brought him back over to airport security. And there was a 20-something woman. Ugh. And she looks at me, clearly doesn't have any children of her own, looks at me like she just knows everything and says, "You need to keep a better eye on him." And I looked at her and I said, "I'm trying the best I can." And I just started sobbing right then in the moment. And it's kind of a constant thing. People who mean well, but have this much information and think that they are in the position and not only can, but should advise you on what you should be doing better. It's a constant thing.
I remember that moment very vividly because I was on the other side of the security line. I had gone through the detector and I was, basically putting my shoes back on, my belt back on, and Harry was on the other side. And I was bolting to get back to the other side. And the TSA people, like 3 of them jumped in front of me and threatened to arrest me for trying to go over the line.
Good times.
Yeah. And I also think of it partly because Harry would get home from his schooling and would take his shoes off when he got in the house. And suddenly, when we had left for that trip, we went through security with our shoes on. And then when we were coming back, it was the day after the shoe bomber, and we were all having to take our shoes off. So I'm thinking, I don't know if what triggered him to go start running around, I think was partly because he would get into the house, take his shoes off, and that meant, I can go nuts now and run around the house. And anyway, yeah, that was quite the moment. So let's talk about us a little bit. And this gets to something that I run into in talking with families dealing with special needs children. And I find not only that I know the statistics, and the statistics are that the divorce rate among families with a special needs child, and particularly autism, is about double what it is the norm. And I meet with a lot of single parents because of that are, for whatever reason, the primary caregiver of their special needs child. And I don't know that there's a way to really even articulate what has led us to have strength in our marriage. But maybe if you could talk about that a little bit, because it's not easy.
No.
And yet, I personally think of, oh my God, how could I do this without you?
Well, I always thought of us as a team.
Yeah.
In terms of parenting. I thought that way before Harry was even born. Just, when it was first just one child and then 2. I think we run relay pretty well. When one of us is topping out, the other one takes over for a bit. So I think that's part of it. I never really thought of it in terms of, well, I have a harder job than you. I've never thought of it in that way. I think we had, when the children were much younger, I just thought of it as very different, demanding roles. But as where you could step in and take care of the children, I couldn't step in and run a financial advisory office. So I did think that you had the harder job of the 2 of us. So.
Of course, I think the opposite, because I used to feel guilty because I'd be, taking a client out to lunch, and it would be a nice summer day, and I might take them to have a lobster roll and talk about their portfolio. And in the back of my head, I'm like, Cheryl would probably really like a lobster roll right now, and she's probably dealing with all kinds of havoc at the house.
I was one of the ladies who lunches, only it was peanut butter and jelly in the kitchen.
But yeah, I think of, we did make the decision, and I'm grateful for the decision because I think it had a profound difference for Harry's outcome, and I certainly think it even probably had a more profound difference in our daughter's outcomes in terms of how they've evolved as human beings. But we made the decision that you would stop working, and that you basically gave up your career. And I kind of felt like, okay, I got to solve the finances for us. So if I have to work 10-hour days or 12-hour days, I'll do it. Because that enabled at least one of us to be there for them. Yeah. So I still think you had the harder job because, but anyway. So, we've done planning ourselves. We've set up special needs trusts. We've informed our daughters and probably need to have further conversations with them about, what happens after we're gone. And I think that's one of the things that you also hear in the autism special needs community, that you really, really want your child to have an incredibly long life, but it would, at the same time, you want to live one day longer than they do because you want to always be there for them. We're not going to always be there for Harry. So we've again built the safety nets around that as best we can using things like special needs trusts and other vehicles like ABLE accounts. But that fear never goes away. And I hope that we've instilled in our daughters that, and what we try to solve for them is that they won't have financial responsibility in any way for Harry, but we certainly want them to take responsibility for being his advocates in our absence. So tell me where your mind is on that level of worry. Do you feel better than you did, or are we still, it's still a worry that's pretty big?
Well, both of our daughters don't live in the same state as Harry, so that is a concern. That may change over time. We don't know. A friend of ours who used to be Harry's teacher is very involved with Harry's life. She adores him. I think of her as a second mom to Harry. And she is local, and she is 10 years younger than me and wants to stay in Harry's life for the long haul. And she has asked me, what do I want for Harry in my absence? And I told her, I want him to feel loved. I want him to feel that people care for him, care about him, are available to help him when he needs help, when he feels he needs help. And she has assured me he will always be loved. And that is a tremendous reassurance to me. We also have family. I have two sisters who are 10 and 11 years younger than me. So theoretically, they'll be around after me. I think of them as stepping in and helping as well. So it's not just our daughters that will be his only resources. And I think it is important to cast that net as wide as you can of people who not necessarily will be able to take Harry in to have them live with them. I'm not saying that, but people who will be his advocate, who will look out for him, who would be able to be consulted in terms of any kind of medical needs, medications, what have you. And a lot of that has to do with legal guardianship, which our girls are alternate guardians after us. But I do think it's important to have people who will just, make sure he has Christmas presents, and make sure he gets to go fishing and maybe gets to go to the movies. Things like that. And those are the things, because yes, financially, I think we are putting things in place for Harry long term. But as his mom, I worry about those other things. Who's going to hug him? Who's going to rub his neck when he has a headache? I worry about things like that. So my thought is, the wider I can cast that net. And fortunately, our boy is very likable. There are a lot of people in our community who adore him. Assuming he is in this community after we're gone, I think there are a lot of people we know who are more than happy to be friendly and supportive and nurturing to him.
I think part of what we kind of decided, and I don't know that we ever really articulated it, because that finding somebody to watch Harry, although we had great experiences with a few babysitters that I think of as family friends at this point. They're just wonderful people that were there for us, but it wasn't just leaving Harry with just anybody was not an option. So oftentimes we just brought him with us. That it was the Cheryl, Harry, and Dad show. That if we were going out to dinner, Harry was going with us. It was he accompanied us for a few date nights and
Yes.
other activities, and it just was what it was. And I think that played a role in him being integrated in the community, in the sense that and one of the things that we had our daughters at separate times dealt with bullying situations, and the irony of it is I never felt that with Harry. He was almost like the mayor of the town. I mean, it still kills me to this day. I'll be walking through a store with him, and people have no idea who they are will come up to him, and I feel like I should remember who they are, but I don't at that moment. And they're, greeting Harry, high-fiving him, and asking him, questions that they know he likes to answer about his favorite birds and things like that.
I'll be walking with him down Main Street, and a young man, I can judge by the sound of the voice, will say, "Hey, Ms. Norton, hi, Harry." And I can't see that far, so I'm just like, "Oh, hi," and I'll lean over to Harry, "Who was that?" And he'll tell me. I'm like, "And who is he from?" "Oh, from high school." And theoretically, this young man, maybe a college graduate at this point, but he's taking a moment out of his day to say hi to Harry, and that's great.
Yeah. And this is, again, I think one of those things where, one of the joys with Harry is that he's more socially outgoing than probably we are, in the sense that we'll be at a store. I'll be getting, I don't know, some twine for the weed whacker, and he will randomly go up to anybody that's there and ask them what their favorite bird is, and ask them their name and how old they are.
Yes. 3 solid questions to make conversation.
Yeah.
What's your name? How old are you? What's your favorite bird?
So I think, the thing that I think led strength for us and for him is not choosing not to isolate ourselves, because there were moments where I think, I just want to wrap a cocoon around the family and just hide. And that I think is not the way to go. And I think we benefited from being aware not to do that. So let's talk about something else Harry often brings up, because Harry always likes what he just completed. And what I mean by that, when he left elementary school to the middle school, he drew a picture for his elementary school teacher, his one-on-one, that said R.I.P. Goodwin School, and it was not anything salacious, but he meant rest in peace, because he was having to leave the elementary school, and
He was devastated.
and these are like some of the surprises. Like I think of the other thing, that he started his elementary career on the first day. He was in the preschool program, so it was 3. Was he?
Birth to 3.
But
So
he was
the
just
day after his 3rd birthday,
yeah.
he started at the preschool.
So that day he's walking down the hall, and he sees something on the wall, and I'll let you tell the story.
Well, he was walking down the hall, but he was a little thing. He was just a tiny little guy, and 3 years old. So his parent picked him up, and so they're walking down the hall with the rest of the preschool class, and they paused for a moment, and Harry looked over at the wall, and he sounded out a word, because he knew how to do that at 3. He goes, pull. And it was the fire alarm. So the girls come home from school. Tessa's in 1st grade. We had a really long fire drill today. We were outside a long time, and fire trucks came to the school. And I didn't think anything of it until I had a conversation with Harry's teacher a little later, and found out that our boy had caused said fire drill. It was a little mortifying, but yeah,
And I'm trying to remember where I was going with that question, but yeah, that was a moment.
Well, his preschool teacher also, is an integrated preschool where typical peers modeled behavior for children who were special needs. And Harry's preschool teacher wanted to demonstrate to the typical children that Harry had strengths, and Harry knew things that maybe they didn't know. So she would purposely write a word on the smart board or the blackboard, whatever that they had, and she would ask Harry, what is this word? And he would know. And it was one of those strengths that we didn't know where it came from, but we reveled in it. That he was doing something ahead of the curve. And Harry's teacher, her motivation was to let other children know about Harry's strengths. But yeah, one of those strengths was sounding out the word pull on the fire alarm.
So I remember where I was going with this. So Harry, again, as he's gone through transitions, he longs for what he just left. So he left the elementary school, went to the middle school, wanted to go back to elementary school, left the middle school, went to the high school, wanted to go back to the middle school. And then he left high school and went into another program where he attended Vista. And when he was there, he wanted to go back to the high school. And one of the things that he would say to me is he wanted to build a time machine to go back in time. So if Harry successfully builds a time machine and you could go back and talk to your younger self about what was going to occur and unravel for us in our lives with Harry, and I don't mean unravel in a negative way, but the journey ahead. What advice would you have to the new mom back in the day? Or second, I mean, not new mom, it was the third, but you know what I mean.
Buckle up, Buttercup. Um, I mean, all parents know this, regardless of the circumstances. Parenting is a hell of a lot harder than any of us think going into it. You really don't know what you're getting into until you're there. Yes, Harry is a challenge. I'm never going to tell you otherwise. But other families with so-called typical children have their own set of circumstances that are also a challenge. My sister lost a baby at 77 days of age. She had had twins, and the little girl didn't make it. And she has, in the 20 years that have passed, she's, to her credit, come to grips with it and has found her way to cope. But that was devastating. We have Harry. We get to watch him develop, granted at his own pace, but he's with us. There are other families with other challenges, drug addictions and other types of mental health issues. We all know this. There are a litany of other things that happen that present challenges when it comes to raising children. What tends to be harder for us is you're around Harry for 2 minutes and you know there's something going on. We don't get to hide it. Other people who have children with some sort of issue or some sort of family issue, if they get to hide it, that's to their benefit. We don't get to hide it. But I think that if I had, if I could talk to my younger self, I think I would say, you're going to have challenges, To be honest, I don't know if I'd want advice as a 33-year-old new mom of Harry. I don't know if I'd want.
You wouldn't want to know.
I wouldn't want to know. I think I'd want to just
roll with it. And...
short of being told, seek out the resources you can, graciously accept the help that comes your way, do your utmost best to get enough sleep, get a thick skin to try to roll with the people who aren't very supportive. Pick your battles. Bite your tongue when you want to swear, because the first person who drops an F-bomb loses the fight. Because if that's the only way you can defend your position, you don't have a good position. So, keep your emotions under wraps and, stay poised when dealing with other people who maybe don't understand and aren't trying to understand. That's about all I think I would want to hear from an older me. At 33.
Well, for me, in answering that question, an obvious answer, given what I do for a living, would be a list of stocks to buy at that moment that I would have, made us bazillionaires by the time we reach our 50s. But beyond that, it would just be to cut myself some slack, because I think, as you said, it's a difficult journey, and there are challenges, and I think I needed to, in retrospect, I should have been more forgiving to myself in terms of, everything that took place, in my responses to it. But you bringing up expletives reminds me of Harry does not swear often, and when he does swear, he generally announces ahead of time that he is going to swear, that we should be prepared for it.
Gives us fair warning.
But I remember one afternoon, it was a very sunny day, and we had a swing set in the backyard that wasn't getting much use at that point because the kids had kind of outgrown it. And Harry still loved birds, and he loved blue jays. And I'm looking out on the swing set, and I see a bunch of crows on the swing set. And I'm like, oh, we don't see crows often in the yard. Harry might like to see these. So I yell, Harry, come on, come see the crows. And his jaw drops, and then he yells, what the F word? Because the crows were attacking a fledgling of a blue jay. And I didn't see that, but he immediately picked up on what was happening out there in the world of nature. And that was one of the few times, that was the first time I heard him use the F-bomb without giving me pre-warning of it.
Usually, I'm going to drop an F-bomb. Oh, well, that's unfortunate, Harry. Are you ready? Okay, Harry, do you feel better now?
So
let's get on with our day.
So let's kind of wrap up a little bit and just talking about his sisters a little bit. So I think they come from a unique circumstance, and I want your view of this. They've had to kind of understand that mom doesn't see things, and mom doesn't drive, and that Harry's has autism, and Harry, and I think despite his autism, he still fulfills the role of a brother and knowing how to get under his sister's skin. Even when they were little, he knew which toy to grab from them and throw over a baby gate so they couldn't get it. But I think they're unique individuals now with a unique world perspective or perspective on life from standing witness and seeing all this and growing up with it. Wonder if you could comment on that a little bit and how you think it has shaped them for hopefully the better.
Well, there was a time in my life when my vision was pretty good, and I used to drive a car, but that was before our children were ever born, so our kids have never seen me drive. And I don't know if they really picked up on it because it was just something they did with you, but I never read them a storybook because little kids like to look at the pictures as they're listening to a story. And if mom has to hold it up to her face with a magnifying glass, it takes away from the whole experience. So, that was your job every night to take the girls upstairs and read them a bedtime story. I think that it's what they know. They don't know anything different. They don't know what it's like for mom to run to the grocery store and throw last minute groceries in the back of the minivan and drive home. When they were little, there was no Instacart and delivery services of the like. And so Mom did a lot of walking. And when they were little, they walked with me. So it's really all in what they know. It's what they were used to. They're wonderful girls. They have a lot of empathy for differences in people. Even to this day, it's almost reflexive now for them. When I go to visit Tessa in New York City, she instinctively puts her hand out to help me down the stairs because she knows those stairs are unfamiliar to me, and I get nervous around stairs that I'm not really familiar with. So instinctively, she reaches out and she grabs me to help me downstairs in the subway or what have you. And ironically enough, her boyfriend picked up on it right away, and now he does it too. It's just, and Abigail is the same way. She looks out for things ahead of time. Mom, watch this. Mom, watch that. I'll help you here. Let's go this way instead. It's just part of their nature at this point. And I think they celebrate the differences in people, otherwise known as handicaps, because of their upbringing.
When I see them out in the world and interacting with people that have different challenges, it's just they pause and they assess, and they don't intrude upon situations, but they're ready, but they know to be ready. And as you said, it's kind of instinctual, and that that empathy just permeates who they are. It's just so I like to think we raise some wonderful human beings. So are there any other topics that you think we should discuss today? I know we went a long time. We can talk, you and I still.
We're good.
Yeah. So
ramble.
Is there anything else that you think would be helpful to share? Again, the point of this is to try to provide a background for or a backstory for people that are watching the podcast, so the perspective that I bring to the conversations, and frankly, there's biases that inherently I have because of my perspective, as we all do as human beings. But I hope this podcast was helpful for you for that purpose. And I also think that you should like and subscribe, especially because you get to meet wonderful people like Cheryl by being a subscriber. So thank you for watching today.
If today's conversation helped you, please like this video so more families can find it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Remarkable Futures. And if this topic connects with your story, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, because here, your story matters. We'll see you next time.